Story 1. My name is Alex, and this happened last October when I desperately needed to escape the noise of everyday life. Work had burned me out completely, so I decided to take a solo camping trip deep into the remote ridges of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia. I had camped alone many times before without any problems, so I didn't think twice about heading out by myself. I left early in the morning. The long drive took most of the day. A couple of hours before reaching the mountains, I stopped at a small, old-fashioned roadside diner because I was starving and knew food would be scarce once I got deeper into the wilderness. The place was almost empty, just a few locals sipping coffee and a tired waitress who looked like she had been working there for decades. I sat at the counter and ordered a burger. While eating, I noticed a man a few stools away who kept stealing glances in my direction. He wasn't staring openly, but something about his subtle looks made me slightly uncomfortable. Eventually, he asked where I was going. I told him I was heading into the mountains for a few days of solo camping. He nodded slowly and said in a low voice, "Be careful out there. It gets real quiet at night." When I asked what he meant, he just shrugged and repeated, "Too quiet." His words lingered in my mind as I paid and left. By late afternoon, I reached a lonely dirt pull-off at the start of a trail. No other cars were around. The isolation should have been a warning sign, but instead it felt perfect, exactly the solitude I was craving. I grabbed my heavy backpack and started hiking. The trail was steeper than I expected, and by the time I found a suitable clearing, the sun was already sinking fast. The forest had that eerie gray twilight color that makes everything look slightly unreal. I quickly set up my tent in a small flat area surrounded by thick trees, gathered firewood, and lit a modest campfire. For the first 30 minutes, sitting by the warm flames, roasting marshmallows and listening to the familiar sounds of the woods felt peaceful. Crickets chirped, wind whispered through the leaves. Everything seemed normal. Then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching through dry leaves. Heavy, deliberate human footsteps. I looked up and froze. About 35 feet away, between two large trees, stood a man. He was completely still, facing me directly. The dying light made it impossible to see his face clearly, but I could feel his eyes locked on me. My stomach dropped. I called out, trying to sound calm, "Hey, you okay?" He took a few slow steps closer into the edge of the firelight and answered with just one word, "Hello." Nothing more. I asked if he was camping nearby. Instead of answering, he asked me a question that sent ice down my spine. "You all alone out here?" I lied instantly. "No, my friends are meeting me here soon." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly and turned away, disappearing back into the dark woods without another word. I watched him go until his silhouette blended with the trees. Right before he vanished completely, he stopped and turned around one last time, staring straight at my campfire. He stood there motionless for what felt like minutes. I pretended to look at my phone, but every muscle in my body was tense. When I looked up again, he was gone. I stayed by the fire longer than planned, ears straining for any sound. Eventually, I put it out and crawled into my tent, telling myself I was overreacting. An hour later, the footsteps returned, much closer this time. They moved slowly around my tent in a wide circle, leaves crunching under careful steps. Then they stopped right outside the thin fabric wall. Complete silence. I held my breath. Then I heard it, a slow, deliberate exhale, so close it sounded like the person was standing just inches from my head. My heart hammered so hard I was sure they could hear it. Every instinct screamed at me not to move, not to make a single sound. If they knew I was awake, I didn't want to finish that thought. This nightmare repeated for hours. The footsteps would circle, stop, breathe, then fade away into the distance only to return again later. Sometimes it felt like more than one person. The rhythm of the steps seemed different. I lay there paralyzed, pretending to be asleep, while cold sweat soaked my sleeping bag. I kept thinking, how many of them are out there right now? How close are they standing to me while I'm trapped in this thin tent? When the first gray light of dawn finally appeared, I hadn't slept at all. My hands shook violently as I packed my things as fast as I could. The moment I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, I heard several sets of footsteps suddenly sprinting away through the woods. At least 3 or 4 people running fast. The sound confirmed everything I had feared. I didn't even finish packing properly. I grabbed whatever I could and practically ran back down the trail to my car. Once inside with the doors locked, I sat there trembling, trying to catch my breath. Exhaustion eventually overtook me and I passed out. When I woke up hours later, the sun was high. Part of me tried to convince myself it was just some pranksters. In broad daylight, it felt safer, so I decided to go back and retrieve the gear I had left behind in my panic. But when I reached the clearing, my heart nearly stopped. The tent was gone. My sleeping bag, cooking equipment, everything completely vanished. Only the black circle of cold ashes from my fire remained. The site looked as if no one had ever been there. I didn't search. I didn't report it. I just turned around and walked straight back to my car as fast as I could. I drove home that same day and I haven't gone camping alone since. Even now, months later, I still wake up at night remembering those slow footsteps circling my tent and that quiet breathing right beside me. I still wonder exactly how many people were watching me that night and how close they really were while I pretended to sleep. Story 2. It started in October last year. I was single and feeling lonely, so I downloaded a dating app. After a few swipes, I matched with someone named Damien. He replied quickly, and within days we were talking constantly. He said he was in the military at a base a few hours away. At first it felt nice, but soon his messages became extremely possessive. He started saying things like, "You're mine now. If I can't have you, nobody else will. If you ever block me, I'll kill you." We had never even met in person. In December, he suddenly unfriended me, and I felt relieved. I moved on with my life. A few days ago, he added me again. Remembering his threats, I accepted the request out of fear. He sent a snap saying he had been thinking about my smile for weeks and regretted letting his dark thoughts win. I replied carefully, not wanting to upset him. We started talking again, but I answered mostly because I was scared of what he might do if I ignored him. He acted like a jealous boyfriend, constantly asking where I was, who I was with, and demanding I turn on location sharing. Last Thursday, I was out late with a friend until around 1 a.m. My friend dropped me off, and I walked down the dark alley next to my apartment building. I had never given Damien my address. Suddenly, a man stepped out of the shadows and called my name. When I turned and saw his face, pure terror flooded my body. Before I could react, he grabbed me by the throat, slammed my head against the brick wall, and stared into my eyes with completely empty, emotionless eyes. "Who were you with?" he snarled. "Why are you out so late? Was it a guy?" He squeezed harder and harder until I was gasping, tears running down my face. I genuinely believed I was going to die right there. He threw me to the ground, slapped me hard across the face, then started choking me again. As I looked up at the black sky, thinking about my deceased dog, a strange smile appeared on my lips as I felt myself fading. Suddenly, he let go. "Shit, I have to catch the last bus," he muttered, and ran off, leaving me lying on the cold ground, struggling to breathe. My throat was so damaged I couldn't speak when I tried to call my best friend. He came anyway. The police took the situation very seriously. They gave me a panic alarm and a GPS tracker because they believed Damien intended to kill me. 3 days later, one of his friends followed me. If my ride hadn't been waiting nearby, I probably wouldn't be here today. Now, every time I leave the house, I'm terrified he's watching me. He promised he would always be there. One day I might not see him coming, I'm not safe, and I wanted to share this story in case something happens to me. Please be careful. Sometimes the most dangerous people find you even when you never gave them your information. Story 3. Imagine checking into a quiet motel for work, only to realize that the person knocking on your door at night isn't looking for a room. They're looking for you, and they already know exactly which one is yours. This happened last fall while I was on a work assignment in a small, decaying town called Riverton in upstate New York. I repair commercial refrigeration systems, and because our team was short-handed, I was sent to service the old walk-in coolers at a family-owned supermarket that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. Riverton was the kind of place where the streets emptied out by 8 p.m., and half the buildings had for sale signs that had been fading for years. The company booked me a room at a cheap single-story motel on the very edge of town, the only place with availability. It had about 12 rooms, all doors facing the cracked parking lot. When I arrived just after 7 p.m., only 4 or 5 cars were scattered around. The front office smelled of old coffee and bleach. The woman at the desk, probably in her late 50s, was polite but kept glancing nervously toward the parking lot while I checked in. As she handed me the key, she lowered her voice and said, "If anyone knocks on your door after dark, don't open it unless it's me or the owner. And if you hear anything strange outside, call the desk right away. Don't go out to check." When I asked if the area was unsafe, she shrugged and mentioned occasional drifters who bothered guests for money. Her tone was casual, but the warning stuck with me. My room was near the far end. Inside it was clean enough, but old, cigarette burns on the furniture, dark stains on the carpet. That first night around 10:30, I heard footsteps stop right outside my door. They paused for a long time, then moved on, only to come back again a minute later. No knock, just silence. Later someone did knock, twice. But when I looked through the peephole, the walkway was empty. Around midnight, I heard metallic scraping near the lock. Through the peephole, I saw a figure crouched low, wearing a dark cap. My blood ran cold. I called the front desk. They said they'd check, but found nothing. Sleep was almost impossible.